Okay, welcome back. This is part 2 of the lecture on ceramics for Unit 2 in the Art Appreciation class, and this will probably be a three-parter because there's a lot of information to cover in terms of describing how someone makes ceramics. Before I finish this page, I did realize that I left out one important piece of information, which was in terms of hand building, I covered pinch pot and I covered coil building, but it didn't actually cover slab building, which is we see that used here as well as uh, on this pot here. And slab building is where you make basically large kind of slabs of clay and then you join them together. Like the most obvious way would be to make a box, but you can make all kinds of vessels because those slabs can be bent and twisted in different ways. So you can actually, in slab building, make a cylinder. But so coil, slab, and pinch pot, uh, as well as wheel throwing. And so on this page, the only thing I had left to cover, I got cut off, unfortunately, right in the mid-sentence. And that was talking about glaze firing. So almost all ceramics gets fired twice, both in a bisque firing and then in a glaze firing. And the glaze firing is usually at a much higher temperature, and the glaze firing involves a glaze. The glaze can be both to add decoration, to add color to the clay, to change its, just its overall look. But the glaze also forms kind of a seal, especially on earthenware pots, because remember, we learned that earthenware pots are quite porous, even when they've been fired at a high temperature. So they need that glaze to give them a non-porous surface. So like if you wanted to use it as a cup to hold water or coffee, you would need to have at least a glaze on the inside to hold that water. Otherwise, the pot would sweat. Okay. All right. So I think we've covered some of the major stuff about how ceramics are made. And let's talk a little bit about the beauty of ceramics again. Like I said in the previous lecture, if you go to any museum, like let's say those of you who live in Mississippi, in the region of northeastern Mississippi, one of the museums that's closest to us is the Art Museum in Birmingham. In Birmingham, they have a fantastic collection of Korean ceramics, both from the 19th and 18th century, but especially 20th century Korean ceramics. And they are some of the most gorgeous um, objects that they have in their entire collection, or in that small little room. And every time I go to the Birmingham Museum of Art, I always make sure to stop by that room, sometimes to sketch and sometimes just to stand for a while and look at the vessels. And it's easy in a world that we live in today where stuff like this or even stuff like that can be manufactured in an industrial process and can be bought at Walmart. You could buy a plastic bowl that could mimic a lot of these surfaces, right, and a lot of these colors. But these were handmade objects, and so in our world it's easy for us to dismiss the beauty of something so utilitarian, but these are truly gorgeous objects. And the tradition of ceramic vessels is especially important in China and in the Far East. And like I mentioned earlier, some of the oldest examples of fired vessels, ceramic vessels, are from China. And in fact, that the Chinese were making fired ceramic vessels before they really entered the Neolithic period, before they were farming or settled farming. And and that's just really interesting on its own. And also, Chinese ceramics was very influential on the ceramics of Korea and other parts of the Far East, and especially on Japan. And we see in Japan a kind of a similar but distinctly different tradition of ceramics developing in Japan. And in the Japanese tradition of ceramics, there was a lot of interest in in the exploration of the beauty of imperfection and the beauty of spontaneity, of potentially of gesturalness, just like in their interest uh, in ink wash painting in Japan, where it was very much improvisatory. There was also a similar interest in Japan in terms of in ceramics. And it's through Japan that the West kind of rediscovered ceramics. Um, Ceramics had, by the time we get to the 19th century in Western Europe, ceramics had turned into a purely industrial activity, something done purely just to make a product and not mastered by artists. And in the 20th century, a man by the name of Bernard Leach, as well as some other people, visited Japan. And Bernard Leach went to Japan to study Japanese culture, but never intended to become a ceramicist. But he attended a tea ceremony, and that tea ceremony kind of changed his life. And it was through him and Ogata Kenzan that the tradition of Japanese ceramics was brought to the West. And this started this tradition of individual potters, ceramicists in the Western tradition, especially in Britain and America. And this led to the current kind of view of ceramics as an art form in Western cultures. And I don't have a huge amount of time to cover all the artists, but one of the things that happened in the US was both the combination of three factors. One, this sort of importing of this Japanese culture of ceramics, viewing ceramics as being about the handmade object, and the handmade object being about a certain amount of spontaneity and a certain amount of acceptance um, of imperfection to make it an original thing. And at the same time, ceramics started to become a field that was taught at American universities. So we have ceramics becoming an academic pursuit, something that you could get a master's in fine arts in. And at the same time, we have the influence of different fields of modern art, especially the abstract expressionists. So we have two artists here who kind of show that kind of combination of those different traditions, trying to find a way of making a career where they're combining those influences and being both successful ceramics teachers and successful ceramic artists. So Soldner and Voulkos are hugely influential on the American tradition of ceramics. Oh, I was going to put text with these. I do apologize. I guess when we get to the third part, I'll have to fix that and add that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about some contemporary ceramicists who I have here, but unfortunately I didn't put text on any of these. Many of these right here are people that I have known and met. So wherever I can, when I'm talking about contemporary artists, I like to include people that I have personally known. So this here is Vessels by Ian Childers, who is our ceramicist at MUW, currently on sabbatical, who is a fantastic guy. And it would, if we were taking this class, in person, we'd be able to go to his studio and watch him do a demo. And this bowl and cup set is by Al Holen, who used to teach here at MUW. And this really interesting form piece is by Errol Whitmer, I believe, who I knew when I taught at Center College. And on this page, oh shoot, the only person I remember is Rebecca Warren. I'm gonna have to go back and put in the new text and do some research. So the other thing I wanted to say, besides talking a little bit about contemporary ceramics, is also to emphasize that a lot of the tradition of ceramics is about vessels. Well, we're getting towards the end of this lecture, but I don't think is about vessels. But sculptural ceramics is a really important part, and sculptural ceramics has always been a part of it. In fact, actually, the oldest ceramics we have from about 30,000 BCE are handmade ceramic figurines, and that were fired probably in a very idiosyncratic manner, maybe just in an open fire. So, and a lot of the world has sculptural ceramics as being a major part of their art tradition, such as in the Americas or in early Qin Dynasty China. So that's a thing I wanted to emphasize. All right, well, we'll end it there, and then in the next part, I'll give you more information about the contemporary ceramicists.